Let's go. Trying to get it, Rick.
Yo, what you
Rick with the
sipping on
blue
over
check.
there? What you got in there? Oh,
Loaded tea, dog. Loaded tea. I gotta get this last 2-3 hours in. I got Irv and Jawan coming in, and then I'm done
right.
with the
Shut her
week. I'm
down.
closing tomorrow. Yeah, try to get me a
Nice.
couple of days off in a
Spend
row.
some time with the family on Easter.
Yep. Had me a little 2-day
Yeah, give
weekend.
yourself
But
at least 12 hours of rest time.
Yep.
Kool-Aid. Bo Willie
What's
said
happening?
Kool-Aid.
Dude,
I know,
I don't
man.
even
You've been
talk to you no more.
on the grind, dude. The bodies are in the gym. That's where Gary's at. He's on the floor. I know. We hadn't even had a
bro. I don't even post like all the Gen Pop stuff. Like, I mean, you can't. A lot of them's older and stuff. Like, they don't want to be on social media. But I've been doing like, dude, I had 3 sciatic pain this week, and then I had 2 follow-up appointments this week. They canceled their appointments. I'm busy. I can't get there, but
Sure.
I feel great. So it's like. It's so dialed in right now that it's perfect. Like it's they don't even need they doing their work. As long as you do it, as long as you execute,
Well,
it's amazing what
that
child
was
rockers
always
can do.
something that we had toyed around with or talked about or, put under the microscope, which is starting people on the recode. That initial exposure to not even just the education, because for the person that's going through the exercise, they honestly don't need to know anything. It's they don't need to know why they're doing it, what they're doing. They just need to make sure that they're executing properly, technically. They just have to get the technique right and make sure everything's aligned. And how they introduce it to the body is everything, because that's where it's that, you're super WOTA and you show up, you can't just waterboard the nervous system. You can't throw it into a single leg drop in on day one. I mean, we've learned this with even our top athletes, the NFL stars, Teresa in there, WNBA star. You can't just throw them right into something and put all that pressure into one column. But when you back it down to all fours and you really start to disperse the pressure and you get things organized, and we put that little post out the other day about mastering those positions of child rockers, toe tuck, and bolt, and seeing them as not exercises, but archetypes, really positional archetypes that were commonplace, that were non-negotiable for really a floor dwelling society, right? If I have to get up and down from the ground throughout the day, if I have to interact with the ground, I'm going to need the child rocker, the toe tuck, and the bolt are going to be sort of transitionary positions that I'm going to be moving in and out of. And we've found the exact way to rehabilitate those positions, to bring, ease and suppleness back to those positions. And when we do it the right way, people start to develop proper foot control. When we develop proper foot control, we break up that ankle, that talus, talus interaction with the foot starts to get put back on line, back in track. And that's where we start to notice, okay, it's so much easier from there. If we can just get that foot and ankle back in line, and then obviously tail to crown is a part of that, it's been so much easier to rehabilitate people and to give people the precise dosage that they need. But we had a question from one of our coaches about the origins of GOATA, and kind of the GOATA Joe story. They asked about, kind of just maybe, new followers or people that haven't heard that story. You can kind of give them the rundown, Gary, of where this whole thing started and kind of bring them up to speed as to where we are now and you know, what we've developed as our Recode program and why we're able to get such quick results with the clientele.
Yeah. So Joe, when Gilly brought me this, when Gilly showed me inside ankle bone high, and you know, Gilly was real big on suppleness because he was a compressed guy. Like he had the lumbar compression. So he kind of played with the Egoscue stuff in the beginning, and he went and got Egoscue certified. Well, when he came to me, you know, it was like I was deep into the, you know, powerlifting. I had a guy that did powerlifting. I had a guy that did Olympic lifting. I was doing all the linear speed training, 40 training, and all of that shit. And then, like, you know, we would do kind of like a lot of combination stuff, which you saw in the post yesterday and all, with the ladder in the middle. And I was real good at like just designing these little course, almost like a little obstacle course in a sense. And I started going back to that because I'm using that now as my conditioning. But Joe was a guy that, you know, with the whole Jamal thing was, I had Jamal, and Gilly said that, you know, Jamal was kind of a little bit of a risk of injury. And so I kind of ignored it. And then when Jamal got hurt his senior year is when I really took it seriously. Well, Joe came in, and a few guys were already kind of playing around with it, but I wasn't. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't really take it seriously. And Gilly, I had Joe, so you know, I was like, man, let me just go ahead and when Jamal got hurt, let me go hardcore with this GOATA shit, I guess, and see what I could do with it. And Joe came in, so I started changing everything. We were still kind of deadlifting and stuff like that too, and we were doing some of that. We had the thing with the lineman rack thing where you could put, it was a landmine attachment. We would still do like some heels down squats with that stuff and all. But we started playing around with the bow in the corner a little bit, and that's actually how the bow got named or whatever, because somebody was like, man, it looks like a bow. And I was like, yeah, it does. Well, that's what we're going to call it, a bow. Because I told Gilly, I'm like, Gilly, first thing is like, nobody knows what the hell you're saying, dude. Like, we got to dial it.
Right.
And he would
Yeah,
tell
he
you
always
the
joked
same
about
thing.
that.
I'm not talking about Gilly. Yeah. So when Joe's like mentor called me and he was like, gee, I need a help, dude. I'm in he was coaching the DBs at one of them Under Armour schools or something like that, like up north. And he was like, I need help, dude. Joe's coming out. He don't have nowhere to do his pro day training. He ain't got no money. Oh, can you help him out? I'm like, well, I said, I tell you what, dude, I've been writing up this program and kind of got it in my head. I'm starting to put it on paper and stuff. Like, what can he do that? Do you care if he does that? He's like, dude, I got 16 inches of snow over here. He goes, you can do whatever you want with him. Just get him, you know. So he sends him over, and Joe comes in. He tests. He was like a 4'5" guy, 205 pounds, and he had a 32-inch vertical, 8.5 foot broad. He was a good athlete. You know what I'm saying? Like, he went to UT Martin. I never even knew who he was, and he was a local kid. And so he comes in, and dude, we started doing the GOATA stuff. He had double knee surgery. He had like meniscus issues on both knees or something like that, and in college. So, I was like, started playing around with it. And it was a lot of ISO holes and stuff, like just trying to. And then we started like taking the ISO and then trying to do the jumps and stuff, because we didn't really have like the foot control piece and the head control piece like defined like that. You know, that stuff got defined more when you came in and started like feeding that information to me, like, well, you really got to have the head here, and you really got to. We knew, you know, Weck was talking head over foot. We were talking column loading. So it was kind of like, that's why we went mess with Weck, because Weck had, you know, and Gilly had talked to Weck. And Weck kind of shunned Gilly, not in a negative way in the beginning, but kind of like, we got
he thought his work was finished.
Weck was real big with everybody was in different places at the time. You know what I'm saying? So as the thing kind of started to develop, like, dude, I'm out at the park one day, and I started testing Joe, and Joe like ran like a 4.39 or some shit, and I'm like, fuck, that ain't right. And like, I'm like, dude, come here. He's like 203 pounds. You know what I'm saying? Like a DB. Like, the dudes ain't running that time at that, So I called. They had another trainer out there at the park. I'm like, come work the clock like for me. So he runs again. He's like 4:38, 4:40. I'm like, this motherfucker's fast. So 75 days into this whole thing, I'm sitting there saying, like he goes to work out for the Saints. He runs 4:28, 4:29. And this shit's like, all right, this is insane. Then his vertical on his pro day was like 38.5 inches. So I'm like, we put 6.5 inches on this dude's vert, a foot on his broad jump. He ran under 7 in a 3-cone or something like that. It was like some crazy numbers or whatever. And then, now, like, it's like we got to the point where it's like, now I got AB. Kind of AB took what he knows and took the information I gave him and kind of handled that part of it for me. And I mean, the running back from whatchamacallit, he just ran 4.5. They have the Saints workout today that he's working out for the Saints, and he went from 4.8 into a 4.5.
Yep.
Like, this is 0.3 on a 40. Like, and his foot strike went from collapsing to sticking. You know what I'm saying? Like, so he came a long way with that or whatever. But so we get in the 40-time results, and then when you came in is when it really started to get dialed in or whatever. But it started to open my eyes that, like, everything that I was doing was wrong. Like, we were still getting faster and stronger,
Sure,
but there was no security in it, and even now today, like, I think there's a level of security that we provide because these guys are still Olympic lifting, they still power lifting and things like that. But I just had today, I started with a D tackle from the Saints, and he's a new guy, but he's pre-med from Penn University. He comes in and he's like, dude, like, this is nothing like I was being prepped in school. He goes, but like, I'm not a stupid dude. Like, this shit makes a lot of sense. And he bought into it quick. So it was refreshing to do a eval on somebody that actually got it immediately and looked at it from a medical side and kind of was able to differentiate between the two. But, Joe was the first one, and that's how it all got started. And then Donald Clay Jr. goes through, high school and college and don't, pull a muscle, and then he got to college, he rolled his ankle with. I mean, there's things we can't protect people from. There's going to be contact injuries and car wrecks and falling out of trees and shit like that and stuff that you can't. But that's kind of like how the whole thing got kicked off. And I guess being that I knew Gilly for so long is that I even looked at it. And then he started playing on my love for my athletes where. It was something that
you had to take a look at it. Yeah, that was the big piece that I remember you and Gilly harping on was, you weren't everybody before, like any training that I had ever done. Whenever I walked into that gym from 7th grade, where I went to the best trainer in town, to Iowa, which is world renowned for their strength and conditioning program. It was never really positioned as, hey, we're going for durability. It's funny because I was talking about this on a podcast yesterday. When you get to like camp and it's like day one of camp, like and the eyes get wide and the coaches are like, okay, it's go time now. The thing that they tell you is your best ability is availability. Like, if you're not on this field now, none of it matters. Nothing, how good you were in the draft or potential, none of that shit mattered. It was just about, can you be on the field? And then it's like, you and Gilly, posed to me, you're like, well, what if you just trained for durability? Like, what if that was just, you turned a blind eye in a sense to strength and speed, because everybody else is talking about strength and speed and strength and speed, but nobody's talking about this durability factor. And it seems like you guys went at it from that lens. Whereas, like, if we just get Joe durable and Joe can just stay together and not have the meniscus flaring up before he walks out to practice, well, that's going to be the best version of Joe. The best version of Joe is going to be able to perform at his best. And it's like, when you did that, you still got the strength and the speed. And that's what I think people are so tied to. First off, the idea that strength is only available to you if you're doing the big 3 lifts. You know, it's only available through the deadlift. It's only available through the back squat. Like, that's the only way you can get strong. And it's like, no, strength is relative. You know, strength is relative to the task at hand. Strength is relative to the skill that you're trying to deploy. The real skill of movement is a bow and a corner. So you'd actually want to be strong through your bow and through your corner. And for the world of, you know, strength training, people are looking at the bow and the corner as something that's durable. But make no mistake that, yeah, of course it's durable, but something that is implied as durable is also, you know, it's strong. It's tough. It does not fall apart. And then the speed component to me is sometimes more to do with coordination. You know, you got people that come out of the womb and they're faster than other people. That's just like there's taller people and shorter people. But there's also this concept of like grabbing your potential that's on the table for speed. You know, it's like if me and Joe are sitting there and we're training, I'm not going to run a 4.4. You know, I'm not going to get down to where Joe's going to get to. But I know that at my fastest, I'm a low 4.7 in high school, and then draft prep, I'm a low 4.9. So it's like there's so much wiggle room that people are probably throwing onto paper that they don't even know that, you know, you find your ranges. Like at your worst, you're here, at your best, you're here. The most durable version of you is going to be the best version of you. And it's like if you go at it from that lens, you'll have everything that you need at your disposal to be the best at your sport. And I just think everybody's so stuck on speed, strength, but the problem there is, yes, you can be strong and fast in a fragile pattern. That's what we're trying to show. Like, that's why it's exploding, because it's fragile and it is fast and it is strong. And so it explodes. Whereas if it's oh man, like that's going to be a big wreck, you know, like picture an F1 that's got an engine problem, or an F1 that's got a handling problem, and it gets up to those speeds. It's a real big mess. You know, a grocery cart that's rolling down the aisle with a wonky wheel, it won't be going as fast. It'll still have destruction, but the big destruction comes from your big athletes. It's like, you know, your aunt or your uncle that's beat up, they're probably not going to tear their Achilles or blow their knee, but they're not put in a change of direction situation, which is, you know, why your athlete has to be aiming for durability, because you're putting yourself in the most pressure-packed situations that you could possibly imagine.
There was such a difference in the way that Joe looked too. See, the other thing too is like, I guess because I was never really stuck in the strength and conditioning world, because anybody that knows my story knows that, I mean, I was a homeless drug addict. I picked up an agility ladder. Like, I have no education. I have nothing. Like I have no, like, I didn't go to school for 6 years and say this is the way and anything like that. And not knocking them guys on anything like that. Just, I didn't go through that. I didn't spend $300,000 on an education that now I look at it and it's useless in a sense. But I didn't even do good in like regular school. Like, you know what I'm saying? I did enough to get by. Like, probably, like, I might have not even been able to go to a D1 school, like, because I was taking review math my senior year instead of trigonometry. You know what I'm saying? So when I looked at Joe, it was like, well, fuck. I mean, dude, he bench pressed I think 19 times. He hit 225 or something. I'm like, and then the other thing too is like, we got these receivers and all that come in that they'll bench press like 225 3 times. Like, the benchmark might be 12,
sounds about right. Yeah,
you know, for the elite receiver or something, some number like that. And I'm sitting there going, I'm gonna sit here for the next 10 weeks and try to get this dude's bench press to 225. Like, bro, you missed that boat, bro. Like, let's just take that box and say fuck it, and not even try to check it. You know what I'm saying? Where I could get your feet better, or spend some time on that, or maybe some extra time on your 40 stance, or some shit. Like, and at the end of the day, too, like, the speed factor is really not. I mean, I was a Saints fan, dude. Growing up, like, Eric Martin was like the best receiver the Saints had, and this dude ran like a 5 flat. But his routes was so precision, and his hands was so. He was really like a tight end at receiver in a sense. But now it's like all speed, all speed. And then like a Jamar Chase comes in, and Jamal been separating from the crowd his whole career. Like, I didn't need him to see him run a 4.3 to know that he was
He's a
going to
football
run
player.
past,
Yeah, he's
like
just a
a
baller.
DB in the NFL. He's been catching slants his whole life, running past people. Like, there's an element of common sense that I feel like that me being the homeless drug addict and having gone through some of the shit I went through, like the common sense street knowledge type of shit, like in a sense, like that shit made me look at this different. Like, what the fuck am I gonna waste my time with that for? I can't.
Right.
I'm not gonna get 12 reps out of this
Right.
kid. I'm gonna get 5 at the best. Fuck focusing on that. If he goes and runs every route and catches every ball, and he can, why would I waste time with that? Joe moves so good. He moves so good. When he went out to the Titans tryout, you're talking about a dude that went out on a weekend tryout where they brought 25 guys in that fucking never get an opportunity. They do this shit. It almost seems like they just do it as part of the, it's just what they do. They got to do it, right? So they out there, and then this dude comes out, and he's like, boom, 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 boom. And he's hitting all these turns. And they like, wait a minute, this guy's different. And then they fucking bring him in. They cutting everybody. He's packing his bags. And the general manager walks in there and goes, you're not going nowhere. You could just, you're going to move lockers because you're not going to be here. We're going to give you a real one. And we're going to give you a real jersey and not that like, and it was just like, then I'm watching him progress into like a backup, like a second string guy's running with the one, like he's getting time. And then he goes out there and he was just a deer in headlights. Or when he got in there first. I mean, it's like we can't make you play the game. And it probably was overwhelming for him and a little too fast and stuff like that. And Joe's a quiet, humble guy. So I got a couple of guys that if they could move like Joe, that's got a mentality like that, they got more of a dog type personality that, but and it was hard. You got to have a short-term memory. At that
you need one at quarterback too.
You know what I'm saying? Me. Like you can't.
I know that from experience. Well, I think the combine thing is this is what's tricky about the combine, and I know this to be true. If those numbers are right, if they're like jump off the paper right, you'll get signed. And I think that's where like a lot of guys that are maybe see themselves as a tweener or like 5th, 6th round, 5th, 6th round, 7th round draft pick. They're kind of in between positions. If they go out there on a pro day or they go to the combine and they light up that data sheet, guys get picked up. Guys get it, like it jumps off the paper. I know a couple buddies that had that where they had a pro day of pro days and they got, they pulled off essentially 6-year careers off of a really good pro day. I mean, it's a real thing. So there is this healthy balance of like learning how to execute really well on pro day and not fall off. You don't want to have you don't want to fall off, for a quarterback. For me, it was kind of like, whatever, Rick, you don't run a 4.5. It doesn't matter if you ran a 5.1. What's the difference? Like you're going to be in the pocket throwing the ball, but you're a wide receiver, a DB, that type of stuff. It just looks good. Like it's one of those, like it looks good. It's better than looking bad kind of thing. So it's like we put all of our eggs in this basket. The problem is, and what I would sort of, put in front of the athlete's mind is, yes, that run is important. And that's why it's like, dude, we're telling you we can get people's numbers down. We've done it. We've showed it before. But here's where you make the team. It's week 3 of the preseason, right? And there's 3 wide receivers or 2 DBs or 2 tight ends, and they're both dealing with hamstrings or groins, and it's your chance. And you get all the reps at the ones. And you get to go and start in the preseason game. That's where I've seen people make careers, honestly, is they get that chance because just the people in front of them are just hurt. One of my favorite stories is I was with the Giants in 2015 throughout the whole offseason leading up until the last preseason game. And we had a kicker by the name of Chris Boswell. And if you know that name now, he's been the Steelers kicker forever. Well, he was the backup kicker for the Giants, right? And me and Chris lived in the same apartment building, and we got to know each other. He was a great dude, and he was a hard worker, and he was so focused. But he was the first person to get cut that year. And he was down. He was pissed. And he was one of those dudes, like he was like a Jordan, like he takes it personal. So 3 weeks go by, right? And I know Chris, he's still working on his game. Well, sure as shit, the day before the final preseason game, we're going up to Cincinnati to play. Ours is groin. Because it's like you're dealing with numbers. So if you got a kicker, you're just going to roll with your kicker in the last preseason. The starter will handle the duty. So sure as shit, they call up Boswell. Boz comes in and he goes 5 for 5. Now, he gets cut, but he gets picked up right away. And then the dude's had a career and he signed contracts. And it's like he was just ready at the right time. And he was available, but you're available because somebody else got hurt. And it's like that's how this game really works, is like your best ability is availability. And I think if you just frame your focus as an athlete from not the 1 rep max, but the durability framework, if you look at it from the standpoint that this isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. It's a marathon with a bunch of little sprints leading up to the finish line. And if you're strong at the end, dude, you're definitely strong at the front. That's like the hardest part, is people are so strong at the front and then they die by the time they get to the end. Or you're just tough enough. You got to be mentally tough enough to run that gauntlet and make it through all that. But you don't want to even put yourself in those positions. I mean, who is that guy that he got, he had his sort of like, it went viral. The one, I think he was, I'm going to butcher his name. If somebody knows in the comments, throw it out there. But he was a wide receiver who, he was like, dude, if I could go back, I wouldn't do it all over again. Because he blew out his back or he hurt his knees. It was viral for, being an NFL player, and he got super injured in the run of the whole thing. And it's like, dude, it doesn't have to be this way. I mean, it's already difficult. Like, life's already difficult. All of us that are sitting here listening, you're probably not pro athletes. But the reality is 9 to 5s are difficult. Like, those are a grind on your body. Traveling through the airport can be a grind on your body. Like, it doesn't have to just be pro sports that's beating you up. It's not just pro sports that's beating you up. It's when you have to sit at your desk for 8 hours a day, when you've got to take that 2-hour commute, and then, you go home and you sit on this, like, everything is taxing you. It's taking away from you in a sense, as far as your movement quality goes. And we don't get to live in a life or in a culture nowadays where it's a floor dwelling culture. So you're going to get yours as you go about your day. That's why the Karubos and the children are so crucial to the study of GOATA, because it's when you watch like heavy deposits of good inputs in the system throughout the whole day. And when you see that play out, they don't have to set aside time to work out or to correct, because the correctives are built into the lifestyle. Like I said, if you're a Karubo tribesman or you're a Yanomami, you're rolling through child rockers, toe tucks, bolts, resting squat, hinge. You're like living in that. Whereas nowadays, in this culture, in this environment, you're actually living in the front chain. You're living in the heel. You're living in the other side of really, the GOATA pattern. You're functioning in a way that the design was not built for. There's a design. I would say the design is inner ankle bone high. The design is, a spiral tissue inward. The design is an integrated tensegrity model. And then the function is bow. The function is corner, right? And it's a design built in a very specific way because it's got a function in a very specific way. Well, now when you take, and you've talked about this, when you take that function and you change that function, you can change design.
Yep.
So you can see it from either way. If you start functioning differently, you're going to affect the design, because the design and the function are intimately tied together. So you have to ask, well, what is its function? All right, well, how do I know what its function is? Well, we've got to use some common sense, right? We've got to look at it in its natural setting. So that's why like I said, the indigenous are crucial. The baby is crucial because you get to see it very, very, very raw. Yeah. And very, very basic. And then, you want to watch it move in its environment. And that's why it's like, why am I watching people drive to the hole in basketball? Why am I watching people block and drive and try, and they're all heels up. Like, they're trying to get heels up. They're trying to get tail back. And then it's like, if that's the function, why why am I bracing my core? Why am I
Why am
putting
I
my heel on the ground? Right? Like I answer that question, and then I look at the design. Then I go and I look at the cadaver, and I have a much, better grasp for, oh, this is what it's supposed to do. And I had this talk the other day. I did a podcast with with John Nelson, the Elite Level Performance podcast. And we talked about the cadaver thing, like, and I think it's so challenging for everybody to see because we're not tuned to, and everybody stay with me here, but we're not tuned to toroidal energy. So like Gilly would always talk about the toroidal energy, and that sometimes put people off, but it's important to grasp the concept of, and this is another way to put it from a biomechanical standpoint, is multi-planar, right? So they're saying multi-planar in a biomechanical setting, but when you actually look at multi-planar in a macro view, it's just toroidal energy, which means it moves multi-planar. So if you took sagittal, you took frontal, and you took transverse, and you combined movement on all three, you would always have a toroidal type of turn, which would mean it would be going down, it would be going back, and it would be going out, or it would be going up, it would be going forward, it would be going in. So there would always be this sort of harmonious turn that would just, when you look at it from a macro, you would step back and logically you would just go, a kid would look at it and go, well, that looks like a spiral, right? Like they would never be like, that looks like a line. They would go, it's a, RJ, it's a multi-planar turn. And we were talking a little bit about on the podcast about like people are getting into data nowadays, right? They're looking at, they're putting the body up on a screen and they're putting these nodes all over it and they're tracking its movement. Well, when you do that and you put a body down, you would see mathematics, you would see decimal points show up for the sagittal, you'd see it show up for the frontal, you'd see it show up for the transverse. You'd see all three pop up. That's why 1D training, right? One-dimensional training like flexion or extension isn't it. Abduction, adduction isn't it. Rotation isn't it. 2D training, just 2 dimensions isn't it. You have to combine all three. The problem with that is it's such a subtle turn and it's never been taught to us from when we were kids. Like no workouts have ever been deploying a bow or a corner. So now you start to work out and you just get into a situation where you're a creature of habit. You're getting back into straight lines. You're trying to hold straight lines because you were told that's how the body moves, but it doesn't. It moves off this very subtle multi-planar turn. And we have found that as coaches, when we just put you in a back chain dominant inner ankle bone high setting, we can find that bow and find that corner so much easier than what we see a lot on Instagram now is people trying to bow or trying to corner and they're just destroying the decompression. They're not really moving in a durable way. They're just moving in a way that looks similar to what a bow in a corner is, but it's so subtle that it's often missed. But the groundwork is probably the easiest to get right just because, well, you got more pivot points. You got more points of contact to help disperse pressure. It's easier to not mess that up. It's very easy to mess up 2 feet or 1 foot. What was that question? General pop talk? No, nothing. So we got a question about, so the question is it best to completely pause normal workout as you learn recode or implement recode alongside during normal workouts? So I think, look, if you're somebody that doesn't have to go out there and compete, if you don't have to put yourself in a tough situation, then why? Why do it? Why not give yourself your best opportunity? I think your best opportunity would be, and this is why we built the Recode program. Like if I'm, this isn't just a plug for the Recode program, but that's how we've found people to rehabilitate properly. Like Gary started off by talking about Gilly being in back pain and then Gary working with people that are in back pain. A lot of that early stuff is about suppleness, is about decompression. And so with the Recode program, we would like for you to start 2-3 weeks of, and we give this first workout for free, Groundwork 101. If you go on gotomovement.com, you can find it. But Groundwork 101 is really just 6 pivot points. And if you start there and you give yourself a few weeks to let the body kind of like, wake up to these new movements, let the foot and ankle change a little bit, let it create a little space. it's much easier to speed up progress as you go. Well, what I find is that people they know that their workouts are wrecking them, and they're going to try to fix them as they're still doing the wreckage. And it's better than not doing anything. Let me say that. Like, I'd rather you do some groundwork before your CrossFit than not do any groundwork at all.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. But if you've got the chance and you've got the opportunity, it doesn't hurt to take 2 weeks off, 3 weeks off, and start with groundwork 101.
I got a client in right now, and he's a big time CrossFit guy. He's in his 50s. He's retired, and he does CrossFit 4 days a week. And he started GOATA, and he is probably about 3 months into his recode, and he's done CrossFit and he's completely pain free.
Yeah.
Now it probably he probably got that way about a halfway through that. So it took him probably a month and a half. Whereas if he'd have took 2 weeks and just said, I'm just going to do GOATA, he probably would have went back in there and never been in pain again.
Sure.
That's just my assumption. Now, it's hard for us to tell you to go dosage some CrossFit or something like that.
Yeah,
but I don't want to say that
out.
because everybody's going to be a little different. But somebody else in here had asked about, they said they heard me say about getting away from the dynamic warm-up. And I think that all goes back to the whole technology thing. Looking at the dynamic warm-up in slow motion and looking at what's actually happening, it's not the same. There's no such thing as high knees, because it creates a pelvic tuck. C skips are retarded when you look at them. Like
all those skips.
All those
FRT. Skips are bad.
B skips where you're sticking the foot out and pulling the ground. That don't happen. If you look at the track, if you look at somebody actually sprint, and then you look at what's on the high level at track and field where they're blowing hammies and groins every day, that stuff is not the same. Like, they're modifying the way you run. Now, can it be fast? Well, obviously, yes, it can be fast, but your day's coming. I mean, Usain Bolt was the furthest away from traditional sprinting, and his day came because he kept putting that stuff in there. So, that kind of falls in line with what I just said about how much can you do. Like, I guess everybody's different. I guess it depends on how GOATA you actually are. GOATA only, that's what I was telling a pre-med guy today, is like, GOATA's the first people that came along and said, okay, this is how the body moves from a movement observation. Nobody said, like, cadaver science is not, it's from a cadaver, it's dead. Like, it's not moving no more. Like, no one else has said this is how the body moves. And then the other thing is I would say that if there was somebody else out there that did say that, it wasn't from a durable standpoint. Like, they didn't look at the durable people. They just looked at people in general, because it's really what Tim Hewitt and them did is they took 115-year-old girls and studied knee valgus. You know what I'm saying? And they developed a theory behind it based off of that. Well, what if you'd have studied 15 girls that never had a knee issue or had straight feet?
Well, the work they didn't finish the work. It's like everybody's in agreement that valgus is doing something bad. Like, I mean, they look at it from a W sitting standpoint, look at it from the ACL tear, the Achilles tear. It's not like we've showed you something different as far as this is exactly how it tears. It tears in a reverse torque pattern, which they didn't see because they're not actually watching slow motion. They're just still frame seeing a snapshot of valgus. But to answer Tim Hewitt's question is he needed the bow. Yeah. He needed to know how it didn't fall apart. Not just because if you know how it falls apart, that's like one of those like, well, okay, we know it falls apart. What do we do now?
Well,
it's like
you're saying too is like you could tell that that's true because you could tell how they try to fix it.
Right. They either try to strengthen it,
or
what they did was they're like, okay, valgus is bad. Okay, that means we got to hold the knee straight. Well, when you go frame by frame, holding the knee straight is still valgus. It's still valgus. It's just less of valgus. But when you take that take it to the field and it's not in your controlled setting of your gym where you're holding their band and you're in your PT clinic, we take it to the field, it's over. It's done. They have got to set a strong 22.5-degree bow with their heel up. Now, when I looked around at the literature, when I was really deep diving the foot, there was one website. It's called thegateguys.com. And they highlighted the, what I think is they highlighted the inside ankle bone high mechanism. They just didn't even realize that they highlighted it. So they call it the calcaneocuboid locking mechanism, which is a fancy way of saying that the way the cuboid moves locks the calcaneus in place. So if you guys take a look at the anatomy, the calcaneus it's a big bone, and it's really the back half of the foot. From your outer ankle bone back is essentially the calcaneus. So it's a very big bone, and then the cuboid sits right in front of it. Yeah, so that cuboid bone there is sitting right in front of the calcaneus. Now, the way that cuboid's going to track, the way that the inside cuneiform works in conjunction with the cuboid is going to essentially lock the calcaneus. So they were observing it, saying that and they said it was right on propulsion. So they're saying as you're going to corner or transfer, they're noticing that there's this cuboid locking mechanism. But they were still under the assumption that you landed with pronation. What we found is that no, the cuboid locking mechanism is from the landing through the propulsion. So the foot can lock and hold a stable, rigid structure and that's why it can do that, because it has a talus above it. So the talus sits inside that cup, inside that bowl that is formed with the navicular, the base of the calcaneus, and all the webbing on the inside. It builds this little bowl. And when the bowl is structured the right way through inner ankle bone high, the talus has this ability to stay harmonized with the hip. So the calcaneocuboid locking mechanism is inner ankle bone high. It's not pronation. It's not supination. It's this multi-planar move of the foot. And to me, it's almost like if you looked at a little bridge, like a little keystone bridge that would be over a creek, right? And all the stones are shaped in a very specific way, and they sort of lodge against the other stone to form a cohesive structure. Mm-hmm. So your foot is doing the same thing. So there is chaos that's afforded to the foot because there's order, right? So if you picture a bunch of stones sitting inside of a tensegrity webbing, which means that if I got a cadaver foot and you're playing around with the foot, you're like, man, this thing's got so much interplay. Well, that's because it's got so much order. Because it has so much order, it can fall apart and have so much chaos. Mm-hmm. And the chaos of that would be letting those bones disperse, letting those stones sort of spread out and not be interlocked and cohesive in their organization amongst each other. But when your foot goes to find the ground and it sticks, all those bones of the foot basically lock together and form this one cohesive structure, just like there's a cohesive bridge over that water that doesn't have any play. The bridge has no play so that you can move over it. Well, the foot has no play so that the column above it can wiggle and move and do all sorts of work that it needs to do. I mean, 22.5 to 45 encapsulates so much freedom that it seems limiting, but it's in reality the most freeing sort of expression that you could display. Whereas a linear expression is extremely locking, right? It's if you're thinking linear, you've now limited the degrees of motion. You've stopped 45 degrees of motion. I'm telling you, you'll have more ability if you actually do less in your training. Whereas when you do this plethora of training, you're really just feeding chaos. But by feeding order, now you take an ordered structure, you take an ordered mechanism out into a chaotic sort of environment, and you're able to be consistent with your movement, right? You're able to cut, you're able to navigate what seems to be a chaotic situation. So if you understand where the foot is going and you understand where it's supposed to be, it makes everything so much easier. But it's like, this stuff's out there and it's been touched on. I remember RJ found a book, dude. It was, if RJ's still on, he could throw the name of that book. It was from the 1800s. And this dude's just drawing pictures and he's like, oh yeah, it's he didn't say it, but it's a half dome. We use that photo at every lab weekend. And it's like
I
from
use
the
it every
18.
day in the eval.
Right. It's like, look, the guy was just drawing it based off of observation, and he was doing both. You know, he was observing, but he was also looking at the cadaver. He was combining them and just logically. And then the other trip part of it is that everyone's like, man, the big toe is so big and it's so strong. It's like, well, yeah, like it's the cliffside. Like think of how strong. Think of how, yeah, like think of how strong that inside portion of the foot has to be, because, dude, that's where everything's going to be cascading and trying to fall. It's like, dude, if you watch Game of Thrones with Hodor, when he's holding the door and he's holding it back, like it's like the big toe is holding back all that pressure from dropping. So like your big toe is strong. It is holding, but it's strong in relationship to every other little tiny movement that's inside the foot. To, as you take a step back, you're like, oh, the foot's trying to form one cohesive shape. It's not trying to land and get all wiggly on you. It's trying to land and stick and not move at all. And when it doesn't move, the talus is like, oh, thank you. You finally gave me a platform. The joystick's like, thank you for holding the controller still. It'd be like holding your joystick, and just imagine you're trying to play Madden and you only get to hold the joysticks.
Yeah,
and you're trying to move, but everything else is moving with the controller. Like you have to hold the controller still and then move your thumbs. And now you can cut and you can move all across the screen. If you're holding the two joysticks and you try to move them, you're like, they're not going anywhere. They're not actually creating a disassociation.
The other thing too is like as you're talking through all of that, and you kind of really start to look at what they're doing in rehab and physical therapy and all of that stuff is it's all to bring you back to a strength component. So, you know, I keep thinking about it because I really feel like it's going to end up happening. Like I think Mike Thomas is going to end up walking in here because he's talking to people about it, and people keep telling him to come on. So everybody's going to be back there at OTAs. So you take his situation where he's had like 3 foot surgeries and stuff like that. They go back in there and they repair as is. So when you go back and you repair as is, now if the foot keeps getting damaged and it's flattened out and you're doing dynamic stuff to it and that disorganized, all of that mess is down there, well, it just keeps breaking somewhere else. It's like shattered glass is almost like what it is. And it's never going to support a structure. So when you get somebody that loses that integrity in the foot and it becomes that, for lack of better words, unorganized, shattered glass type effect at the foot, not like it's broken up, but it's been flattened out and destroyed over time. Whereas like you've been loading the inside edge, you might have dealt with turf toe, you might have had some Liz Frank type shit or something where everything's flattening out. And then you get to a point where you have a knee injury, right? And then they go and they take and they fix the knee, and you go back out there on that disorganized foot, and then you have the knee injury again. Sure. Or you start compensating on the other side and you injure. So they never get it fixed because they don't go to the root of the problem, but they don't know it's the root of the problem because there is no blueprint. Because they're not working off of the right stuff. It's all fix. But that whole physical therapy world is built off that blueprint. The training industry is built off that cadaver science. Everything's built off of the wrong thing. It's got to be, because where we at? GOATA wouldn't even exist if they had it right.
Well, everybody that, if you walk into a PT clinic, they're under the assumption that pronation's okay. You know, they're under the assumption that the knee points straight. They train it.
Elasticity,
right?
Like it's dynamic.
Some people are under the assumption that the spine doesn't move. I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like people are afraid to challenge authority. They're afraid to be like, dude, the laws of the facet joints don't even say that. Like the laws of the facet joints are bend it once, bend it twice, turn it, and it all sort of like snake-like behaviors into a bow. Like the facet joints move in a bow. If you're to play around with just the torso region, Fryet's second law, if you're to move this thing, it's cohesive. It has a law to it. It does a certain thing, and it certainly is embracing it. But then why are the doctors at the highest level telling you to stop moving your facet joints? Like, where did they get that? Like, where did they come up with that? And it's made up.
Do they exist if that information's out there? I mean,
I don't
have accidents, but think about think about the hit. I had this conversation, the kid's pre-med, right? So we have this conversation during the eval. I'm like, go break down the whole layout, right? You go to the doctor with back pain. You think Gilly shit started with let's put a cage on your back?
No.
Or do you think it started with here's some anti-inflammatories, here's an ice pack, take 2 days off, you don't do shit, you're gonna feel better.
Mm-hmm.
2 days later, you go back to the gym, or he goes trying to play golf, or he sneezes and he throws his back out again. And then they go back and they're like, well, you're weak, man. You got a weak core. You can't support yourself. You're a big guy. So they give him 1,000 glute bridges and crunches and all kind of shit like that. And then the next thing you know, it's all in the open chain, most of it anyway, some of it. And then he goes and he don't get any better. He's still tight. He still feels worse or whatever. And they're like, well, we got to do an MRI. Well, if you go and you do an MRI on everybody in the, like from 30 to 50 years old, every one of them's going to need a surgery based off the MRI. I mean, you can find a reason to have
You'll
surgery,
find something.
right?
Yeah.
So eventually you just keep walking through that thing. But the healthcare system is built that way, right? It's a system that's built by a higher power that likes it because it brings in money. Well, we can't change the system, because now if there's a preventative issue in there, I just cut out the physical therapist or some of it. I just cut out the medical. I just cut out the medicine, that anti-inflammatory, that pain pill, that copay, that all of this shit's getting cut. It's such a big business that it's never gonna be removed. It's always gonna be like, until that you develop some kind of power number. I mean, I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, I know. You can't give them too much. You're going to get us killed.
Yeah,
talking about
talking about. I done had this thing turned off.
Bro, they're going to run off. They're going to run our cars off the road.
Daryl's fitness is on there. What you weigh right now, Daryl? 285. You coming back as a tight end?
Hey, somebody asked about, so the issue with the dynamic warm-up was more with the type of exercises and not being movement-based versus a static stretch. So a bolt squat to hinge flow, preloaded squats would still make sense. So yeah, so I mean, the real issue with the dynamic warm-up isn't that like you're bouncing up and down. Don't get us wrong. The issue with the dynamic warm-up would be like, picture any of those skipping exercises that you're looking at from a side view. You would see the spine. If this is the crown and this is the tail, the spine is like this. It's upright. It's very rigid. This is how you get hurt. You really should have your tail back and your crown forward. Well, when the tail is back and the crown is forward, you're not doing high knees. So high knees promote this, like, picture like the band, the leader of the band running out with his, you know, the baton, and like they're kicking their legs forward and their spines are like tilted this way. So they're kicking the legs, they're skipping forward. It's a very front chain dominant type of behavior. This is still front chain dominant. Like, you're never you don't want your spine in a vertical setting like this. You don't want an upright spine. You want the tail to teeter back, the crown to teeter forward, because it's going like this. It's like those little like Segway motor scooter things that people have, where like when they go to move them this way, like the wheels, the bottom of the Segway kind of goes back, and the front of the Segway, the handlebar goes forward, and they kind of ride like that. Your spine does the same thing. Like, the whole system is trying to go this way, trying to go in that direction. So that's why, like, you know, you could do ladder drills. You could just do sprints, but like, it's going to feed tail back, crown forward. Now, what we do is we basically do a run through of the recode program in a microcosm, essentially. We'll do some all fours work. We'll do some, 4 pivot point work. Then we'll go into the toe tuck to bolt. Then we'll stand you up. So now we're on 2 pivot points. Then we'll go to 1 pivot point. Then we'll go unsupported. And then, like, Gary could throw them on the ladders. Or you could maybe do some sprints, or you could do some side-to-side shuffle. But, like, I think more or less the idea of the dynamic warm-up, or what our thought process was probably as coaches, is get the blood flow going, right? Get the muscles warm, get things going. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a specific type of exercise, talking from like isometrics to pulsing movement to sprinting or bounding type of work. But the idea is to get things warm. We just want to make sure that we're feeding the proper pattern inside of the warm-up. We don't just want to go, well, these are dynamic warm-up exercises. Why? Well, because it was in Stack Magazine.
Yeah,
That's why. Like, well, no, it doesn't matter.
If I'm warming up and I'm like the good thing about the squat to the corner is I could simulate the explosive movement in the extension, right? Like, let's use the cadaver word. I could go up and push and drive through the ball of the foot and open everything up the way that it's supposed to. I could go to the wall with a plate as a first exercise, and I could just rest on the wall and I could press through. I could go up and engage that hamstring explosive like and open it up to where I'm in a loaded lengthening position, because that's when the problems start to happen is when, you know, these guys go and they warm up and they do this dynamic warm up, and it's like this skipping, like raise up the knee and open up the hamstring, and then they do this stuff, right? This is a hamstring stretch. Like, we did all of this shit, and it didn't work.
I've done it a million times.
Like it don't work. And then that's nothing that the leg isn't behaving like this, right? It's not behaving in a straight. If you go and look, they got that picture of Usain Bolt, and he's right next to Tyson Gay. And Tyson Gay's foot is in the ground. His knee is like this. His chest is here. His head's in the column perfectly. He's in there, and that it's open and the glutes back. And he's back in. I'm not saying that he didn't have any injuries, but the reason why he might have had injuries is because he was doing Nordic curls, Olympic lifts, and training this when his body was trying to do this. It was trying to set a bow and then release. So everything that he was feeding the nervous system, it wasn't what body was trying to do. So eventually, it's like we talked about earlier. It's like the Ferrari on the bad frame. You're putting these inputs into the body that ain't actually what's really trying to happen, and the body just breaks.
You're putting in a function that is directly sort of going against the design. You know what I'm saying? Like, the body wants, I can't, you know, we'll answer this next question about the patellar tendon thing next year, because I think you probably have some experience with that one. But I can't stress enough that we are designed to bow and corner. Like, you're all GOATA in the womb, right? If everything goes according to plan, like Philip Beach shows in his work with muscles and meridians, this thing is it's a repeated process of the embryological development. We're all folding and building in this very specific way. And it's so fine-tuned that if like 5 or 10 minutes of movement is missed in that embryological development, you can have serious mutation. Like, that's how finely tuned this system is. Like, the whole universe is finely tuned. So it's super specific. And now you take a foot in an ankle complex that's trying to be inside ankle bone high and trying to bow, like take Tyson Gay, for example, but now he's in the gym, and his function in the gym is to magnetically try to put that whole foot in the ground because somebody's yelling at him to do tripod foot and to do a hinge. Well, his brain's now having, like, there's a combat going on where his foot's, it's being told what to do. It's trying to go heels down, but this, you know, this deeply embedded pattern and this sort of design is trying to bow and corner. So you've got disharmony. You got a foot that's dropping low, and we see this a lot. People show us like, well, his kneecap's pointing out. I'm like, yeah, but look at his foot. Like, why do you think people's meniscus are being ripped apart? Because their shin is going one way and their thigh is going another way. And there's just this grinding that takes place at the knee joint, which is just a meeting spot for two ball and sockets. That's all it is. It's a hinge because there's a ball and socket below and a ball and socket above. They have to be on the same page. But if you've been teaching your heel to go down, you've been teaching one ball and socket to go one way while the other ball and socket goes the other way. And there's going to be knee problems that come off the back of that.
Yeah, the recovering from a patella tendon rupture 3 months post-surgery, what's the point of focus that you would start from? Everything with the patella tendon, the one common thing that is going to be involved in that is you're going to be front chain because you're going to be quad dominant. So that's going to absolutely be part of it. So like I would definitely focus on having my quad constantly decompressed. We don't train in isolation, but a lot of times when you become front chain dominant, from a suppleness standpoint, you can isolate, like in the sense of we want to decompress the whole system, or we want to be supple, complete suppleness. But like if you having patella tendon issues, it's usually because all of this shit's too tight. So I've seen it could be behavioral too. Like front chain dominant and front chain dominant behavior is two different things. Front chain dominant could be I stand like this, right? And then front chain dominant behavior could be, which is why you stand like that most of the time, is like I'm squatting like this, where I'm going knees over toes, and I'm doing this stuff when in the gym, or my feet are open and I'm going this way. So now my patella tendon could be tracking the wrong way, which it's all a version of front chain behavior. If I'm track and field, right? I'm trying to take and grab and pull, and I get to a certain point where I'm just super quad dominant, and this quad's constantly on, and then the patella just can't hang in there no more. So you're gonna be quad dominant. That quad, it's Osgood slider, just patella tendonitis, and like it's just like a version of Osgood. Like it's just in the kid, you hear Osgood in the kids. Like most adults that have the knots had it when they kids, because that tissue is developing right there. So I would be getting my quads dry needled all the time, because it'll take the pressure off if it's super tight. So that's one thing that I would focus on. The other thing is like you 3 months post surgery. I don't know what kind of recovery time that is. I'd have to see, but I would get an eval done and find out where it's stimulated from. Like, why are you front chain dominant? What are you doing? How are your feet? What are you in alignment? Like, there's so many questions that go into that, but like I know you're front chain for sure.
I usually, like when I have those types of situations, my first question is, can you get into all fours?
Yeah.
Okay, so we check that box. These are milestones, right? All fours then becomes child rockers, which is essentially saying, okay, from all fours, with the toes in and the heels away, upside down, inside ankle bone high, can you push your sit bones back to your heels? And then can you remove your hands and just sit in that position right there with no pain? Not meaning like I can get there, but I'm grimacing. Like, no, you could probably be okay there for like a minute, 2 minutes. I mean, you're not supposed to sit there until your legs fall asleep, but you should have some sort of like ability to say, yeah, this feels good. It feels supple. It doesn't bother me. Then the next step is like, all right, I got to get my toe tuck back. So somebody asked about toe tucks. With the child rocker and the toe tuck rocker, rocking is a part of it, but there's also just this end goal, which is the milestone, which is getting your sit bone to your heel. So you can use your hands, and Gary does the thing where he tells you, bring your hands closer to your knees, and you kind of let your hands like become active. And I push my sit bones back to my heel. So a lot of the toe tuck, what's tough about the toe tuck is you got to find the grip of your foot. First off, if you're doing toe tucks with socks on a slippery surface, just forget about it. You need grip. So you either need like a nice flexible shoe that's going to grip a ground, or you need to take your shoe and your sock off and find like a hard floor that you can grab some traction. Because what you want to do is you want to back into the ball of your foot. So I'm essentially going to get this on the ground first. Then I'm going to glue this to the ground from big toe to pinky toe. And then I'm going to back everything into that toe tuck position. So I like to tell people, try to push with your hands, like push your sit bones back. Now, you're only going as far as the system will give you, but it's a way to like, you don't just have to just start rocking right away. We usually tell people go very slow, find their end range, and then just kind of pulse at that end range. And there's a little bit of play that you get within that. But the big toe pad connection is not easy. It's probably the hardest part about toe tuck and bolt is getting the foot to straighten and then getting the big toe pad to find a cohesive organization to where it's on the ground, but so is everything else. It just takes time. You have to go slow. You have to let the system open up over time. It may mean a week or two of just chow rockers with little bouts of checking in on the toe tuck position and then being very strict with the toe tuck position. But make no mistakes, man. You're trying to check those boxes. You're trying to check the chow rocker. You're trying to check the toe tuck, and you're trying to check the bolt. And
when the guy, I used to before. You used to decompress the quad. If that's what you're saying, you probably was doing it in an open chain, and that's what I was saying about the hamstring injury earlier. Was about getting it lengthened in the way that you're going to use it. That quad muscle, you can actually, like, being in a chow rocker position is a closed chain. It's loaded. You could decompress that quad like that.
Well, and you can't just like stretch your quads, guys.
Yeah,
like you have to.
Be the
somebody
system.
Somebody asked about the ACL. Like, look, the reason you guys got hurt is because you landed inside ankle bone low. Okay, like that's what the evidence shows us. The evidence shows us that inner ankle bone low landings are not reliable. They're not reliable at all. It makes sense because of the way the anatomy is structured. And it makes sense because, well, when I turn on the tape and I see injury, I see inside ankle bone low. So there's a lot of evidence that says it's not reliable. That means that right now your body is tuned to land inner ankle bone low. I've got to retune it to land inner ankle bone high. So what you guys need is you need a washing of the system. Like the way the nervous system is working is it's taking in this information, it's taking in these inputs, and it's essentially creating like a memory log, like a back sheet, a log of information. And I kind of want to like almost like a flip book of paper, like a notepad. I want to rip out all that old paper and I want to put down new instructions. So I want to give the nervous system new instructions. It's really just old instructions that were there at the beginning, but you overwrote those with the new update. So you updated your OS, but you accidentally updated a virus. You updated an inside ankle bone low virus. Okay, so we've noted that the virus is in the system. I'm going to put new software in to wash out the bad information that's there. That's the recode. That's all you're doing is you're essentially putting in a new software system, a new software program that links up very well with the hardware, right? This software program is intertwined with how the hardware wants to work, so it's cohesive. So once you get that recode sunk into the nervous system, and now your backlog is reading as inner ankle bone high, and you're reading as bow and as corner, which is what your assessment would be telling. Your assessment is essentially our chance to look at the backlog, right? I want to see you do these movements because it's going to tell me what your motor memory is. And I want to see that motor memory change as I go through this recode program. So as we're getting you stronger in these patterns, you'll notice your assessment change from the beginning to the end, meaning that you'll run, and your run will show up as inner ankle bone high, back chain dominant, bow to corner. Now, once you are showing that on tape, and it's consistent on tape, and you're going to keep those patterns, those inputs in the system, that's when you're safe. So you're not safe because you're doing GOATA work. You'll decompress, you'll feel good, you'll be on the right track, but you're safe when you're GOATA. And that's why the assessment's a crucial piece, because that is your chance to say, hey, this guy's sprinting at me full speed and he's presenting GOATA behavior. So that's how you're going to prevent an ACL from ever happening again. You're going to get things assessed, get things corrected, and then you're going to strengthen and you're going to control. Should rocker flies cause cramps in the front pocket? Yes. So the rocker fly is most definitely going to light up the front pocket, inside pocket of the leg.
You get a cramp anywhere.
Yeah, you might cramp anywhere. Yeah. Like it's okay to cramp. Cramps are kind of essentially like you're finding, you're working the kinks out. It's kind of a case of like, look for the cramp, and then can you just hang out there? Can you handle it?
Arch of the foot.
The arch of the
when you start
foot
doing
should be
a lot
burning.
Of back chain work.
Burning, maybe
well,
that's the right word. I said burning is maybe not really the right word, but like there should be like a whoa, like my foot's cramping. Yeah, like
it's a different stimulus though. It's not the pain. It's
not a pain, right? It's not a sharp
and
pain.
We take health Revotex. We take walk-ins. I saw your question earlier. I mean, we kind of do.
Is it better to train each step together, even if you can't keep toe pad down, or better to not progress until toe pad is perfect. So I would say this, to me, it's a case-by-case scenario. Like, I'm looking at the system that's in front of me. If I've got a young high school kid who hasn't really been injured, that's a pretty resilient system. You know what I'm saying? Like, it hasn't been injured a bunch. It's young. It's pliable. I'm probably not going to hurt it. So I can give that system more. It's youthful. You know, the more youthful the system, the more interplay I have to throw more at it. Now, the older the system is, like when Gary's got a sciatic pain person, somebody that's in pain or is older and they're going to bring to you their laundry list of injuries, and they're going to bring to you a really tight, really compressed system where they can barely squat, they can barely toe touch. That person there, I treat them like a fragile piece of, china, like a fragile piece of hardware or a fragile plate. I do not want to break it. So I'm just going to go really slow. I'm going to err on the side of caution there. I'm going to go very slow through the process. There's no need to rush. If this person comes to you with sciatic pain, they weren't moving anyways. So what's the difference? Like, start them off really slow, get them back to where they need to be, check all the boxes, and let their body, because they just need more time. Like, I think the best thing you could do for somebody that's 50 plus and tons of injuries or trying not to get surgery, give me 2 weeks of rockers. That's it. That's all I want. Just give me 2 weeks of rockers and then come back to me, because that I know will set the stage. It will open up the foot and ankle complex. It will do it in a way where they've got 6 pivot points, so not any one segment gets too stressed. I think the part where you can go wrong is when, as you remove pivot points, you dump more and more pressure into the lower portion of the system. Generally speaking, people are struggling at the lower portion of the system in some way, shape, or form. Like from the knee down, you could say obviously hips and backs are falling apart, but that's even still lower in the system than it is upper half of the system. So the more I get to like bolt and bow wall sit and elevated drop in, I'm localizing pressure, and I'm making it very stressful on those bottom pieces of the column. When I get to all fours, I disperse pressure. So it's just much easier for your nervous system to go, that feels good. That feels better. It's a nice massage to the system as opposed to like deep tissue. Doesn't mean you won't get to that point where you're putting more pressure and you're localizing it. But at the beginning, it's better to go slow, and it's better to have this feeling, even if you're listening and you're going through the recode yourself, it's better to have this feeling of wanting more than to be like, dude, this is too much for me to handle. I'd rather you be on the other end of like, I can handle more. I can handle more. And just letting it slowly go on that sort of trajectory than like, dude, I can't get through all this reco work. It's 8 exercises, too much. My foot hurts. It's like, just go slow. There's no need to rush, And then if you're an athlete, you're probably in a position where you're youthful anyways. And athletes are different. They have to be, they're under a totally different stress test than the general pop.
Somebody said, what is the priority number one for jumping? Dude, landing is always going to be the priority. Like, because you don't blow your knee out jumping.
Yep. 100%.
Everybody does it on the way up. Lateral sports, straight feet.
There is no lateral sport. Like, that's another misnomer.
I guess he's talking like basketball.
No, I get what you're saying, but just so you understand, like, there's no, like, your body isn't looking at it.
In the corner,
right,
still.
like, you don't have different, your body doesn't shift into different gears
they
from
really,
a standpoint of linear and lateral.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Yeah, lateral, and I think to kind of define what you're saying, Ricky, is the linebacker commits eventually.
Yeah.
Like, they just kind of in two bows. And
they're waiting to roll. Like, so volleyball is changing direction.
The dude stealing bases commits to go.
It's
they're not spending a lot of time lateral.
So it's a two-way go. When you're in sports and you see people with these wide columns, it's not, look at the column air. When we say you're outside your columns, that means that you're loading both legs at the same time outside your columns. So if you're standing still and your feet are outside the fist width distance, that would be outside of the columns. Michael Jordan's not outside his columns when he's in his defensive stance and he's got his feet wide. Michael Jordan's in a two-way go. When Randy Moss is getting ready to cut on a slant and his feet are wide, he's not outside his columns. He's in a two-way go. When he goes to actually go to his left, he loads his right. When he goes to go to his right, he loads his left. There's still this loading process where you put all the pressure into one side and then you transfer it out to the other side. It's always helpful to envision a compass around you. And you vision this compass. If I was to walk backwards on the south, right, just to go south, straight back with my eyes still facing north, that would be deploying reverse gear. But any other direction that you were to turn, like if you were to actually be in sports and you were to think of that whole compass from like southeast to southwest all the way around to the north, every turn that you would take and move along that compass are all bows and corners. And that is sport. That is life. That we're saying that no matter how you turn this system, when the foot places down and it loads pressure, it should be loading into a bow and then transferring into a corner. There's this very tiny sliver of movement that's got reverse built into it, walking backwards, jogging backwards, running backwards, very inefficient, right? You can use it in sport to keep your eyes forward when you're gathering information. Some of the times I see it are like a DB backpedal or like a basketball player getting back on defense. You'll see these little bouts of what is true reverse gear. But then when they actually go to cut and make the explosive movement, that's all drive gear. So you're really not in a pure backwards scenario. You don't want to be in a true backwards scenario because backwards is you're going to get beat. Like you can't run fast backwards. Like think of a DB getting his cushion chewed up. He's only backpedaling because he's trying to gather information. But once his cushion chews up and he makes a decision, every turn that comes out of a backpedal for a DB is a drive gear. It's like you're in reverse and then you shift it into drive and you whip the car around and now the car is going this way. So picture your car in reverse and then picture like Need for Speed and they just shift it into drive and they spin the car and now they're driving in the same direction that they were going in reverse. It's like the same idea. That's why I love the car analogy because that's quite literally what's going on. Like whether you're in, your only time you're doing it is when you're going straight back. And that's what the lift was for. Because we were walk, jog, run, walk, jog, run, walk, jog, run. And I can walk, jog, run anywhere inside that compass outside of straight back south. But then if I want to pick up that boulder or pick up that dead carcass that I just killed, I'll stop movement. I'll lock my heels into the ground and I'll move everything in reverse just to scoop that thing off the ground. But it's just one rep. It's just one backing out of the driveway. You don't just keep backing out of the driveway and keep going. No, you go in reverse once, then you shift into drive, and you spend your 99% of the day driving in forward gear. Well, our bodies are the same way. We were walk, jog, run, tons and tons and tons, thousands and thousands of reps, drive gear. Yes, you have the ability to shift your car into reverse, put your hands on something, and pick it up, but you're not going to sit there and pick it up till failure, to exhaustion, to the point where you're rewriting the way that your nervous system likes to behave. That's the difference. Yes, so reverse gear is really only 1% of what people do naturally, essentially. So to paint a picture, I would say it's 99% drive gear, 1% reverse in real movement in how your day-to-day is operating. But now it's kind of flipped. I would say 90% of the day we're in reverse. We're sitting in a chair, right? And then I walk with improper, a suffocated bow, a suffocated corner, if you will.
What is locked up if I see someone with a corner off the ground, but the release is bad and the reset is sloppy? See, that's where it could be so much. Like it's a lot.
I would say it's a missing corner. So what I've seen is that you've got 45 degrees of cornering. Okay, so straight foot. So remember how Gilly saw this. The second toe is straight. So the second toe has to be straight for the 22.5 to be in place. If the toe and the kneecap are pointing in the same direction, there was no coil at the ankle. So there's no bow. That's why crooked foot is bad, because you're not creating there has to be a disassociation. Remember the joystick. I can't hold on to just the joysticks and move the controller. I hold the controller. I don't let the controller move. Then I move the joystick. So the foot's pointing straight. Second toe is straight. then the kneecap points out. That signifies the coiling of the shin and the thigh. That kneecap points out roughly 22.5 degrees from that second toe line. Now, you have 22.5 to close and then another 22.5 to close. So if someone lands, their kneecap opens like this, and then it closes all the way to here. What you're seeing a lot of times is you're seeing the kneecap open, and then it only closes right to here. Kneecap open, and then it only closes right to here. So you're seeing some of what looks like a corner. So you're like, well, they're cornering. Technically, yes, they're cornering, but they're only cornering some of it. They still have all of this to finish. So you'd be rehabilitating this finishing of the corner. When they get that back, then you really see the heel flick away. Then they're able, because they have space in the capsule, now they're able to reset and keep the heel away like you would see Ed Reed's videos and Randy Moss videos. Those guys are full corners, and then they usually keep the heel away
I didn't
on the reset.
read it like that, Rick. I was reading it like he was asking if they had the corner when the foot wasn't on the ground, but I mean had the corner in the air. Like in other words, the sometimes. So what I would say is if they have the corner, if they locked up, if I see someone with a corner off the ground but the release is bad, they can't be in a bow then. If they got, in other words, they wouldn't have a bow, right? Like what's locked up if I see someone with the corner off the ground? Like in other words, they're in the air and their knee is pointed in, but they not. I mean that.
I mean, you could have. I've seen it where people have all of their corner and none of their bow.
Yeah.
Well, they're in the corner. Yeah, they probably have landing problems.
But that's what I'm saying. They missing a bow is what they actually missing. If you see in a corner off the ground, then they not having a bow in their landing. They landed pre-cornered.
Yes.
Is what they doing.
Yes.
That's what I don't know if I understood the question right. What's locked up if I say, yeah, they don't have a bow.
Probably don't.
If they cornering, if their foot's coming off the ground in the corner, then they pre-cornered and they're landing. It's probably a female. It could be.
Yeah, we see that a lot with the females. Somebody asked, is core training exercises useful? No, core training's awful. So if you are laying on your back and you're doing core work, you are stimulating the front chain of your body. Your front chain, your front abdominals are not the powerhouse. That's not the way that your body is designed to work. Your core is on the backside of the body. So if you look at the thoracolumbar fascia as a hot spot, it's like a core set. You want the backside muscles to be strong. You don't want to train the front core exercise. That's another one of the biggest lies of exercise world is the core. Train the core, train the core. It's like one of those like yes and no. It's first, what is the core? Oh, it's the abdominals. False. It's the muscles on the back half that you should be focusing on. The back half is dominant. When you sit on your back and you do all that ab stuff, you're just training your hips, your torso, your upper limb to all get suffocated to the front. So yeah, your abs look better. They look more defined because you've been stimulating them. But at the same time, you've been locking up your hips, you've been locking up your torso, you've been locking up your upper limb, and they're not going to function the way that you probably want them to function if you're an athlete or just if you're a human being trying to move around pain-free.
How do we turn? Listen, kids are so young. All you gotta do is make sure that your kids they play outside. Let them play outside. Let them go run around. Keep them off the video games. If they sit in the desk all day, make sure they sit in child rockers at home. You can do their homework in child rockers. That like when take care of the 90% of the day. Yes, child, you gotta sit in the car seat. We don't want you to break the law, put your kid at risk. Like, you know, when you do have the opportunity, put them in child rockers. You know, y'all sit down and watch TV. Watching in child rockers. Get you know, some what would you say? Get a Caesar chair. Get as much as you can. Like, you know, go after the rest of the day while you're
Look, I mean, what I would say is we're in a world now where we're always going to have a rinse. Like, we're always going to have to be rinsing away bad inputs. It's just, I mean, I don't care who you are. Like, you could be the most disciplined person that's like, I'm going to sit on the ground throughout the day. like even in that situation, I would still bet that you're going to get into a car. I would still bet that you're going to have a long car journey at some point, or maybe get on a flight somewhere, or maybe go to a party where it's just everybody sitting in chairs and we're talking. There's going to be something that's going to probably put you in a little more of a compressed situation. So that's why I say, like, the three positions that I try to, at least for my own body, get back to every single day is I try to at least once check off the child rockers. Like, get back there, push back there, let a couple pops and cracks happen in the system, get my toes tucked, push back to bolt. You know, I like to try to, like, just make sure I get down to the ground at least one time during the day and get back into those positions. It doesn't mean that you have to do, oh, I got to get my 100 rockers in today. That's not what it means. It means you need to get that position rehabilitated to the point where it's comfortable, and then you can't lose the comfort that you have in that position. So sometimes it's just a case of getting back into that position one time a day and making sure you still have that ability. There he is. There's Big Duck.
So, dude, somebody said something about taking him out of the shoes, and he's right. Like, get him out.
Yeah, I mean, there's some reality to that too. But
did you see the Teresa Plazon's post? Somebody was like, do you realize shoes increase performance? I'm like, oh, they do. Like, somebody went on there and was like, she's in Vans.
oh,
Matter of fact, it was like one of them the trainers that did GOATA for, like, he thought he was doing GOATA. He didn't finish the education. It was somebody that works for him. And he said something about RJ. He said something about take her out, straight out. My oldest came here to see the dog. Now.
Oh, the pup?
Yeah. So she's in Vans training. And I'm like, and the dude's like, just my professional opinion. That's how he said it. Just my professional opinion. She shouldn't be training in Vans like that. So then the other dude, the other trainer got on it. He goes, puts the hand emoji over the face. And he goes, yeah, she's in Vans, LOL, or something like that. So I'm sitting there going, well, she is Teresa Plazon. She's an 8-year veteran in the WNBA who 3 years ago was retired after 2 back surgeries, found GOATA, has signed 3 contracts since then, and played in high-top basketball, high-performance shoes her whole career, and ended up with 2 back surgeries, whatever it was. And now she's training either barefoot or in some flat shoe like a Vans or Chuck. I think she knows what shoe to wear at this point. Like that. But and then he put an article in there about shoes increasing comfort and performance. And I'm sitting there going, that's the problem. That's the problem that we have with shoes, is that we put them on because they feel good, but they destroy our foot. It's a gas. We have the shoe.
It lets you get sloppy. I think it lets you get sloppy. Look, the shoe thing to me is I'm somewhere in between on it. Like, I think that there's more shoes out there that are okay than, like, we've been put on to believe lately. Like, we're believing this, like, every shoe is bad unless it's made with a minimalist sort of outline as its built-in design. It's like
RJ,
that's not really true. RJ's got the
shoes.
worst shoes.
The worst.
Dude, RJ's big into the zero game. I usually only let Jordan.
You can just kick your foot up on your desk, and I know you got them blue things with are they Pro Wings or are they?
Dude, if it's not Jordan, I'm probably not wearing it. But the thing is, like, you got to find a shoe that has a toe box that's wide enough for you. Like, that's the first thing. Like, get that one right. So Vans is actually a good shoe to choose because it's got a wide toe box and it's got no arch support. It's pretty much flat. It's a zero drop, as they would say. It's pretty good.
But it's not going to increase
choice.
Performance, is what I was saying about the guy. The guy was saying something about shoes increasing performance. I'm like, he sent an article into the chat, and I'm like, yeah, because the shoe companies wouldn't have made that up. You know? Right.
It's a case of, like, it's case by case. Like, you got to find the right shoe for you. I'm not saying that some people might put on a Jordan. They might be like, this is way too tight for me. Okay, well, then that's not the one that you should be wearing. Like, if your toe box is crammed, get out of that shoe because that's not a good situation. I do think that there's a little bit of play there, though. Like, to me, arch support is irrelevant because I'm holding my own foot up anyways. Whether there's arch support there or not, it's like taking a shit at the airport and you're going to hover your ass over the toilet seat. Like, you ain't sitting on that toilet seat. So it's kind of the same idea. You're not sitting your arch down on that arch support anyways. The one that is like somewhere in between is like the heel. Like, you don't want a big old heel lift. Like, some of these running shoes, like an Air Max, is terrible. It shoots up too much. But there are some shoes that they just have a little bit of heel lift. And more or less, it doesn't throw you off too much, and you can still get away with it. But the shoe equation is one that you've got to figure out for yourself. So, and then, somebody said, I don't need cushion. And that's a case of work yourself up to that. Like, don't just take your shoes off and go barefoot and start going at your day-to-day stuff right away. I would most definitely slowly ease your way into a barefoot or a minimalist lifestyle. Definitely start to go that direction. Like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be working towards that direction. I'm just saying, like, you're also not on grass and soft pack mud. Like, you're on hardwood floors, you're on tile, you're on gym floors, you're on sidewalks, you're on cement. Like, there is a little bit of cushion to your shoe that I think is helpful. So I think that it's okay to have a little bit of cushion. And I think that if you are somebody that wants to abandon that cushion, just make sure you go through the necessary steps where you slowly wean yourself off of a cushioned shoe. You don't just kind of take the foot out of the shoe right away. That's just,
I tried to do
it'll
it.
hurt yourself. Just be a little bit, be aware of those things when you're going about it.
Hey, I gotta roll, dude.
We've been an hour and a half. I'm gonna try to get this up on YouTube tomorrow, guys, at the very latest. But Recode program is up. Recode program is up on Recode 225. It's our step-by-step A to Z program from all fours to a single leg. It's pretty straightforward. It's 16 weeks total. If you work through all of it, you get 50% off your first purchase by using code RECODE50. If you want the education, if you want to deep dive this thing, if you want to know how all the details go and you want to know that from your, recoding and healing your own body, or if you're working with a group of people or a community, check out the coaching certification. If you're interested in finding out more about your own movement and you want another set of eyes, check out the movement assessment. So once again, everything's on gotomovement.com finally. If you're new to this and you don't know where to start, go on there on the homepage and click Get Your Free Guides. That'll give you the first workout of the Recode program for free. It's Groundwork 101. Run at that thing for 2 weeks and then, jump into Recode 225 or jump into the movement assessment, or maybe go get enrolled in the coaching cert. So if you guys have any questions at all, you know where to reach us. You can DM us on Instagram, or you can hit that contact us button on gotomovement.com.
Yes. That's it.
All right. Everybody enjoy your week.
Yep.
Happy Easter.
Easter.
Peace.
Remember what he says.
Yes.
So it ain't bunnies and eggs.
Remember today.
Bye.
I'll talk to you, buddy.
All right.
Peace.
Later.